Morning, gentlemen. Good morning, gentlemen. It's really nice to see a big crowd. Amazing what happens when you bring in an important speaker. Let's pause for a word of prayer. Good and gracious Heavenly Father, we gather at the beginning of the new year, full of expectations for what's ahead, new opportunities, new struggles. Pray you would be with us and this church family as we move forward together. We thank you for bringing into our midst Hamilton Barnes. We look forward to the work of his ministry among us. We thank you for this food this morning. Pray you would bless it to the use of our bodies. Help us to have the strength to go out in the world and do your service. We ask it in your name. Amen. All right, so do we have any announcements this morning? Bert tells me he has something of an update about next week.
Good morning. Welcome all. It's nice to see such a great turnout and a good start to this year. Next week, I have a concept of a plan. And I suggest that you stay tuned for further information about the program next week.
That's called tap dance.
Anything else for the good of the group? All right. Elmer Stansel and Bruce Snyder were both on the committee that called Hamilton to us, and so I'm calling them to make a brief introduction.
Well, thank you. Good morning. It's such a Bruce and I have been waiting for this day to introduce Hamilton to you guys. So we're very, very excited to have him here, and I know everybody else is too. Bruce and I have gotten to know Hamilton since probably, I guess, the early fall. We went through a process that started back in April and vetted candidates and read resumes and all kinds of stuff. And Hamilton, above all the candidates that we looked at and interviewed, stood far out beyond all the candidates that we saw. And two things to me. One, when we talked to Hamilton, I could see him fitting into our congregation, and his ministry and the things that he has done. I thought fit really well with our congregation, and was really excited to do that. And secondly, his warmth and his personality, it just seemed to connect with all the members of the committee, and we thought that would connect well with the congregation too. So.
Now, the real story is Hamilton is some kind of an award-winning barbecue guy. So Elmer and Matt that were on the committee are part of the Holy Smokers, and they were like, we got to take that guy. So anyway, just joking. He's a fine fellow, and we hope all of you will realize that. Don't ruin it.
No pressure on. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
It's like red and green at the same time.
That's good now.
Okay, perfect. So first thing first, I did stay up and watch the entire game last night. So I'm a little tired. I got rid of football for a couple months and it was like the worst in my house. So I definitely got it back. The one thing y'all do need to know, fun fact, I have one key to this building, master key. When Emily Beaver started, they gave her a whole stack of keys like she was the janitor. So when I came on, they handed me, they said, this is your key. And Tavares said, just so you know, Emily didn't get the master. She got a whole stack of keys. So that's your fun fact for the day. Just a little bit about me. I am coming on as the Associate for Congregational Care. I will largely be working with committees like Stephen Ministry, Visitation, Pastor's Aid, I think largely called the caring committees, and as well being the male pastor of the group. I'm sure I'll be involved with all the men's ministries as well. Somebody asked me yesterday, will Lucy still be doing men's ministry groups? I said, I don't think so, but I don't know that for sure. Visiting congregants in their homes and facilities and hospitals will also be a big thing, as well as come to things like men's breakfast. A little bit about me personally. I'm married to Carrie Barnes. She currently works as a hospice chaplain up in Gainesville and previously served Buford Presbyterian, and before that, Shallowford Presbyterian in town. She is also a Presbyterian pastor and worked as a Christian educator before seminary. We met during our time at Columbia. We got married back in 2014. We have 2 children, Miller and Violet. Miller is going to be 10 January 16th. He is a Cub Scout. He is a member of his school's chorus. He competes on his school's robotics club. And he's also a basketball and soccer player, though he really wants to start playing football. We'll see how that goes. He is very small. Violet is 7. She is also a scout, loves camping and running through the woods, but while wearing a dress. She is into sewing. She goes to sewing classes and has her own sewing machine that she can run. And she also loves anything involving animals. And weirdly, her favorite TV show is a show where a guy renovates swimming pools. So she'll sit there and watch this guy tear down pools and rebuild them for hours and hours. Another fun fact, I left my role at Piedmont on December 12th and started here on December 14th. So finished on a Friday, began on a Sunday, so it was wide open. I worked as a hospital chaplain at Piedmont for 14 years, spending most of my time with cancer patients and patients in the ICU. In order to be qualified for work as a hospital chaplain, of course, needed a bachelor's degree and a master's of divinity like all other pastors have. But then I had to complete 1 year of residency in the hospital called clinical pastoral education. And I actually did 2 years of that. I went back to school to get a second master's in pastoral care and then did a second residency as well. And during that time, I began working at Piedmont 1 night a week and then slowly became full-time there. I grew up right outside of Greenville, South Carolina, in a place called Powdersville that is technically not a real place because people there would not want a tax base for government infrastructure. So they're just on the edge of a bunch of counties and have private everything. My mom passed away a couple years ago, and my dad and my brother live in the house I grew up in, and they're still there, and we see them often. Carrie's mom is in Summerville, South Carolina, as well as her grandmother, and she has a younger sister who lives in Annapolis, Maryland, married with no children, and then her dad is up in right outside of like the Fayetteville, North Carolina area. I'm not from a line of preachers or even Presbyterians. I grew up Baptist. When I was really little, my family didn't even go to church. I was 5 years old, and my kindergarten class had a invite your friend to church day, and I was the only friend in the class who didn't go, so everyone invited me. And then we went, and my family started attending, and that's the church my dad still goes to, so it works. My dad is an Air Force veteran. He served during the Vietnam era from 64 to 69. He was a physician's assistant running emergency rooms, and then when he got out of the military, he didn't have civilian credentials, so he didn't practice medicine after that. and began working in the chemical business, starting with unloading trucks and working his way up. And he worked in that same building until he retired at 70 years old. They had to tell him to retire. They threw him a big party, and my dad's a big hunter, and so they gave him a big deer rifle and said, "You're retiring," and he said, "I guess I'll retire." But so I grew up being around that. My dad would he would let us work there doing the jobs that the full-time guys didn't want to do. So I did all the landscaping and painting and scrubbing floors. From like 14 on through graduate school, I'd work there on every break we had, like Christmas break. I'd go there and work and get spending money for the year. One time in high school, there was a snow day, and he didn't know school was closed. And he drove us to school, found out it was closed, and he just drove us to the plant and had us work for the day instead of taking us home. But it was a gift because I didn't have to have part-time jobs during the year working like one day a week at places. I just had enough walking around money for the semester, so that worked. But all that to say, I'm not immune to working hard, and I've been somebody that's always done that. Also very active in scouting. Started as a Tiger Cub in the first grade. Earned my Eagle Scout at 14, and worked at Boy Scout camp every summer from age 15 on through beginning of seminary. I even was their camp chaplain during my between my second and third years of seminary when I was doing my hospital internship. That's a big part of my life as well. Grew up deer hunting and turkey hunting, camping, rock climbing, mountain biking, and then paddling kayaks, canoes, and whitewater rafts all over the Southeast. I'm an avid whitewater paddler, started paddling whitewater when I was 15 years old, and something I still do, though the size of the rapids we go over has changed since my children are involved now. But they all do have everybody in my family does have their own kayak, and we do like to go out in the summertime on the Chattahoochee. The summer after I graduated seminary, I had the summer before my hospital internship started, and I knew I wanted to do something fun, so I went up and worked on the Nantahala for a raft company, and then I also worked with a river ministry on the banks of the river called River of Life. That was through a Methodist, Bryson City United Methodist Church, and the pastor there is a guy named Wayne Dickert, who dear friend now, but he was Olympian canoeist. He was actually the oldest American Olympian in the '96 Olympics, and from the area of the Southeast he was competing in. So that was pretty cool to get to know him and his story. And that's pretty much me. I worked at the hospital. I really never thought I would leave the hospital. I thought I would work there forever, and then this opportunity came about, and excited. This is my first time not being the pastor's spouse too, which is interesting. Me and my wife switched roles. She was always the pastor, and I was her husband. And unlike Trinity, they had never had a pastor's husband before, so they weren't quite sure what to do with me. Especially when I started washing the dishes in the kitchen. During seminary, everybody had a job that was part of their scholarship, and mine was in the cafeteria. So I would cook short order and wash the dishes after the meals. And so when I showed up there, I was like, I know how to use this commercial dishwasher, and I'd jump in and wash the dishes, and then everybody was like, ooh. The funniest one was, I'll tell you two funny stories from there. One time, Miller had just been born, and since Carrie was in worship, I was the family volunteer for the nursery. And some church ladies thought there was a problem because I was in the nursery. And I'm like, no, I'm just the one in here today. Secondly, to deal with the Holy Smokers, I know where they parked the smoker underneath that awning. There was one Sunday there where I was going to grill burgers. I did grill burgers, but I had it underneath the awning, similar awning. What I didn't realize was that was the intake for the HVAC for the building. So during Sunday service, they're getting like Kingsford charcoal getting lit as I'm lighting that grill, and worship's like midway through. So when Elmer showed me where the smoker was parked, I'm like, yep, I know all about this. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
When you were at the hospital, did you just put your name into a pool for potential applicants?
But my role at the hospital, there,
You decided then to put your name into.
oh, in this pool? Yes, sir, I did. I was approached, I had saw the position and the description was honestly like the first church job I had seen that thought I was really well suited for and was really interested in. Also, knowing this part of town as well as I did, I thought I was a good fit. But like not even like 3 hours later, I started getting calls and emails and stuff from people that asking if I was interested. Another aside is a lot of times those positions are posted kind of in theory. They already have somebody picked out and they're not really going through the search process. And that's not what this group did. They did the hard work of really doing a real search and doing it the right way. And that's why it took us from late July to December.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
You've chosen to be in the hard part of life in a way, dealing with people who are sick, dying, in trouble of one kind or another in the hospital or in churches. Why do that? And what have you learned from all of that?
the short answer is that's when it matters. That's when people need somebody. And in the hospital, it didn't matter if you were their denomination or even their religion. You were the somebody there right then. And a lot of times there was no way their local pastor could get there in the amount of time that crisis happened in seconds. And that's why I'm drawn to that kind of ministry. Probably the same reason I like to do things like take whitewater rafts off waterfalls too. There is a little bit of excitement with kind of being there when it matters. And the so what? Like if you're not there when it matters, why are we doing this?
Hamilton.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. Welcome to Trinity.
Thank you.
You became a Baptist at a young age. You're now a Presbyterian. I mean, there are a lot of Baptists here, a lot of former Baptists here. I'm one among those, a lot of former Methodists, et cetera, small town people. The evolution of your theology from what you were exposed to in a small town in South Carolina is, I assume, a Southern Baptist.
Yes, sir. I don't think there's
to-
another kind over there.
That's the way it goes. Describe that kind of how you've grown in your your walk with God, your theology, those sorts of things in your life.
Yes, sir. First off, the church I grew up with had some schism, and kind of being a young person and seeing the infighting, and then learning. I went to Presbyterian college, and there was a lot of Presbyterians, and most people on Sundays went to Presbyterian churches, and so started doing that. But learning about the structure and that there were people in a governmental structure, not that they were raining down things to do, but more that could step in when problems arise, seemed like a very good thing for people in the moment, that they didn't have to figure it out on their own. Secondly, things as simple as being exposed to female pastors and realizing that was a good thing and not something I had a problem with, and that this is a place that welcomes that and affirms that, and it's not the issue of the day or whatever. But really, I would say the structure of the denomination, of being a support for the local congregation, as well as things like female pastors. Another piece that's just more practical is I remember the first time I went to a Presbyterian service, and I was maybe there like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm like, I have not heard about the end times happening yet. And like maybe we need to talk about it more over here, but like I was like, I'm glad we're talking about other stuff. So that's the short answer, I'd say.
I'm curious, does a hospital chaplain work for Piedmont or do you work for some church who was your employer?
I worked for corporate America. I was an employee of Piedmont Healthcare.
And did you work in any particular Piedmont locations or did you work all over Atlanta area?
I worked at the Atlanta location. So we got hired to our location. And one time I realized that Piedmont Mountainside up in Jasper didn't have anybody. And in fact, I said, can I go up there one day a week and see people? And they said, no, you don't work for them.
Hamilton, thanks for being here. Could you tell us a little bit about, once you put your name in the hat or in the whatever it was, and you started getting phone calls, could you walk us through what that process is like, and what, from your perspective, and we don't know what it's like from either side,
Right.
all of us do, but could kind of walking through, because you said it took a while.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting just to hear that evolution.
Sure. So two professors of mine, Martha Morkish, theology professor, and Bill Harkins, pastoral care professor, both independently reached out to me, email and Facebook, and asked if I was interested in. Martha asked if I was interested in leaving the hospital and working at a real big church in town, with her words. And then Bill basically posted a thing, and I'll call out to a bunch of people in kind of the chaplaincy therapeutic world and said, I'm retired now. I don't know a lot of people, but does anybody know anybody that might want to look at this position? He said, I've talked to Paulette Slauson. It looks like a great position, a great committee, and the church seems to be in a healthy place. And Bill is somebody who, on his therapeutic side, had worked with Trinity in the past. And so he knew a lot of the history of the congregation, and he asked, and I said, in fact, both of them, I said, yes, I'm interested in talking to him, knowing that if it came about, that's great, and if not, I still had a great job at Piedmont. And so that conversation happened. Then Paulette reached out by phone asking me if I had got some emails from her, and I said yes. And the next thing, there was an email, like online questionnaire, kind of a quiz thing that came out that I had to fill in. I can't remember, like 4 or 5 paragraph answers. Then several weeks later, maybe even a month or two later, there was a Zoom interview with 4 members of the committee that was recorded, and then the rest of the committee watched that interview. And after that, then I met with the committee in person here at Trinity, and that was a whole process of finding a time in this building with so many things going on where there's nobody else here, and also keeping me away from other people that might know who I am. Lucy and I went to college together, so they definitely didn't want her seeing me walking around here. Lucy is also somebody that I had reached out to and asked, is this a real search? Does this look like a viable thing? Have you already picked somebody out and you're just kind of doing this? Because I thought, I'm not going to waste my time if they already have somebody picked out and this is a formality. And she's like, no, it's a real search. It's a real thing. And I said, okay, good. I'll probably put my name in the hat then. So that happened. And then the next step, we met for a breakfast. And then we talked more. That was the time when Carrie came to the meeting. And then, like, maybe later that week or the next week, met with Presbytery and the committee. And they met with us both independently, and it was called suitability of call, to make sure that everybody was on the same page about what the job role was and the expectations were. In fact, they had me in the groom's room, kind of sequestered, and they were all in the parlor. So we met for a meal, and then I was placed in there, and they met with them for, I don't know, an hour and a half, and then they came in and talked to me, and then afterwards we conversed and said goodbye to each other, and after that it was working with them on the details of the suitability of call contract, which y'all all voted on for the congregational meeting. On my end, I knew this was a big congregation. I knew there was probably a fair amount of Piedmont employees that were here, or at least knew somebody here, and I was not wrong. And I knew that I wanted to come here as soon as possible, but I also didn't need Piedmont finding out about this job before I had put in my formal resignation. I also didn't want to put in my 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it was before the congregation had voted. I knew the committee felt good about it, and I knew that was a semi-formality, but I knew just as a matter of principle, that's something not a risk I was willing to take. And so I had a letter of resignation written out, and I pressed send on that Sunday afternoon, right? I forget if Elmer or Matt or somebody called me and said that the vote had happened. And then there was 2 weeks at the hospital that I was unloading my stuff. And then I also called my colleagues. I work with 5 people in a small office, and I didn't want them to find out through the grapevine. And some of them are Presbyterian pastors as well. So there was definitely like people that could have told them. So I wanted them all to find out from me. And so I did that on Sunday afternoon after I'd pressed send on that letter. And then I told my bosses and everything the next day, and had a nice lunch, goodbye lunch. You've not ever been to the Black Bear Tavern across from Piedmont Hospital? It's a fantastic meal at a kind of shady looking place. So we had a good lunch there, and then a little goodbye the next day, and then I hit the ball running here. I've really never proofread a bulletin, really ever. I did a church internship in Kingsport, Tennessee, at a little church that had two male pastors, and one was a Marine. And I don't think we proofread bulletins there that summer. We had bulletins, but that's about as I remember about them. One was a big golfer, and one was a boater on the lakes, and that was more what we talked about than bulletins. So when I came in, it was like day 2, I think. We proofread every Christmas Eve, the Sunday before Christmas Eve, the longest night Thursday service, and then the Sunday after Christmas. And then like one sit down. And that was wild. So that was kind of a whirlwind into the life of big church in the busiest time of year, but it's been fun ever since, especially getting to know people like y'all. Does that answer your question? In the credit of this group, they met weekly for like 8 or 9 months, 7:15 in the morning every Thursday. And so they had the heavy lifting of, and I think that 80 resumes. But they put in the hard work for sure.
I'll just make a comment, Hamilton. The committee sort of pre-announced that they had selected a candidate and was going to present that candidate a couple of weeks, in the future. This was maybe back in November. And that was made at this breakfast. And the comment was, what's her name and when is she going to start? So we're just really glad to have you.
Well, it was funny. It was funny when I got one of the notes is like, they're looking for a pastor who's mature and possibly male if possible. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm mature, but maybe mid-career, I guess. But I'm like, that's right. I'm the diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it was funny. I'm like, I don't think they're allowed to say that. But another piece of it was I did meet with Rebecca in between that. So after I met with the committee, before we did all the suitability of call stuff, Rebecca and I met, and we sat down at the coffee place at the Atlanta History Center, and we probably talked for like 3.5 hours. And it was supposed to be just a short, and it was, I'm here for it. But it was good. It was a good conversation, and I think we both felt good about moving forward. I thought she was meeting with, bunches and bunches of people. I now know I was the only one she met with. Trying to think. The only other piece was Kevin Laxton and I had to get a headshot, not on campus, so people didn't see us. So we went to the library down the street, and then we got kind of kicked out. So we had to do it on the outside. The librarians were circling us with like evil eye a little bit. So I thought that was like a spot where he knew he could do it. And he goes, I don't think they like us doing it here. I'm like, why'd you recommend this? So my headshot is the outside brick wall of the public library down the road. And then him and Lucy were brought in to put together the brochure that y'all got. But besides that, it was radio silence.
Just a quick question. I know you talked about a lot of your responsibilities. When we look forward to 2026 and obviously, 52 Sundays, everybody has to preach. What type of, how does you and Rebecca and Lucy and Emily, how do y'all share the preaching responsibilities? How many times this year do you have to preach, Rebecca, Lucy? Any insight on that?
The best I know, I'm going to be preaching, I think, roughly every fifth Sunday. I think it's kind of like Rebecca preaches twice a month and everybody else preaches once a month is roughly what I understand. But the other question everybody was asking me is like, are you willing to participate in Sundays? That was kind of a hard question. This position is not just going and visiting people in the hospital. It's also you need to have leadership on Sundays. Yeah. And I know some people in the role I've had in the past probably would have been like, no, I'm just going to do the pastoral care and counseling side. I don't really want to do the Sunday stuff. But that was pretty hard. This is part of the job.
Doing Sunday stuff.
Hamilton, as it's probably not a fair question to ask you since you've really
Ask away, Scott.
started, but what do you see as the potentially most challenging part of your job, or the most challenging issue that you anticipate confronting working with this congregation?
One is this is a well-oiled machine, and jumping into something that's already moving has its challenges. Learning everybody's names, which name tags in here really helps. But I don't know what I don't know yet. And so as far as I know, kind of inserting myself in some of these ministries to learn what they do before really having any recommendations, I think is probably the hardest part. And not know. Another piece is just, it's exciting when I came because I got to be here for Christmas and all the excitement with that. But the hard part was there hasn't really been like a average week yet because we had the week of Christmas, and then week of New Year's was limited to no office hours, and then this week Rebecca's on leave. So, and in the process of me coming on, they also lost a finance person, so that kind of set some other things in motion that made my onboarding a little different as well. But I'm joining a great staff and figuring out how I fit into them. I guess is probably the biggest challenge. But not a hard thing, just different. And I haven't started a new job in a very long time.
Welcome to Trinity. Have you met with Tom Farmer?
That's the other question. Everybody's like, have you met with Tom? Have you met with Tom? Have you met with Tom?
And the
Tom,
answer is,
the answer is next Tuesday. Tom Farmer went out of town for his anniversary, as he should have, and then got the flu and was contagious. And so he is feeling better now and has told me he's going to be here on Sunday and is not contagious. And we are meeting here at the church next week. So it was kind of like, well, Rebecca's out of town, but Tom, you'll meet with Tom and he'll get you up to speed and he's going to tell you everything you need to know. And then it's like, well, so it's coming.
Do we have any questions from anybody on Zoom? George Stickle.
Hamilton, it's good to have you here. When you think about theology and the depth and breadth of the Bible, do you have a favorite passage, one that you go to in your time of trouble, one that you have liked to share with the people at the hospital, or theologians that maybe you've been impressed with?
Yeah, absolutely. Say one book of the Bible that I lean into a lot is the book of Job. Looking at the things that Job went through. And I think we kind of hold that up as like Job went through more than we all have. But I think if you look at somebody with chronic illness or a family that's in crisis, it doesn't look a lot different than Job. And kind of seeing where God is in that story and where God may feel in their story. Another place I lean on is the Psalms of Lament, where the whole psalm, it's why God, where are you, God, where are you, God? And then at the end of the psalm, the person kind of comes back around and sees God. And I think when we're in crisis, it's really hard to see the end of that. And that I think it's important to normalize our feelings about family, friends, who God is, our anger or frustration with life circumstances and all that entails, and to point to scripture where we see that as well. And that the Bible's not this thing where people are extra spiritual than we are, or an ideal that we can't achieve or whatever. Another thing I do look at a lot is actually Jesus dying on the cross and thinking about it from a Trinitarian perspective of God the Father, that God knows what it's like to lose a son, and kind of God the Father's grief work around Jesus' death.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to have you here.
Thoughts, questions? Hamilton, any last words you want to impart upon us this morning?
I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be a part of this group, and I'm really glad that y'all are a group that gets together and eats good food and doesn't take themselves too seriously, and I think I'm going to enjoy being a part of that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. I should be able to remember the middle name is Hamilton. But I want to apologize now.
That's not true. It used to be done okay.
So sorry. Glad to see you.
Yes, sir. I got to try your,
Yeah, yeah. He looks good, that's all.
Okay. I got some. Later in our careers, I knew her was better than I knew him.